24 hours. Thank you for staying awake for us. Mr. Sykes, I must turn to you because before the debate, you wrote a piece titled, Dear Democrats, here's how to guarantee Trump's reelection. You were essentially warning candidates if they shift too far to the left, they will give the next election to the president. So last night was their first night out there. What'd you think?
Well, it looked like everybody read my article and decided to ignore each and every point that I made because that was a debate about, who is moving farther left. I mean, I'm sitting making notes as the night went on. I think one of the key things was Elizabeth Warren and other candidates doubled down on the fact that, yes, Medicare for All means you are going to abolish all private medical insurance in this country. Trust me, that is a huge gift to Donald Trump. They're talking about massive tax increases. You're talking about registration, licensing, possible confiscation of guns. Look, these are all issues that are winners for the Democrats. But there seems to be this movement to say, how do we take these winning issues and turn them into losing issues in a general election? So in terms of winners and losers, I have to tell you the Trump people are very, very happy this morning the way the Democrats are positioning themselves outside what they regard as outside the mainstream of American politics. Because, again, Donald Trump doesn't need to win this election. He needs for Democrats to lose it.
But Elizabeth Warren wasn't surrounded by people who were raising their hands when she said, let's wipe out private insurance. Let's actually share that.
Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, start off with.
Victoria, do you agree with Charlie's point? Because there was 10 people up there and only 2 raised their hand.
I do, and this is where we really saw the clear divide of the Democratic Party. The 2 camps were a big tent party, but there's the moderate camp and there's the progressive camp. And I have to admit, I really like the raising your hand type of thing, because you saw some who were like, do I raise it? Do I not raise it? And Charlie is right that this is something that's going to hurt in the general election. But you know what? To get to the general election, you have to win the primary. So here we're going to see health care being defined very starkly. And then once in the general, you're going to see those edges soften. But for right now, they have to get that nomination.
Fernand, take us to Florida. You know this state. You know these voters. There are many voters in the state of Florida who are Hispanic.
Right.
We saw not 1, but 2 candidates last night on the stage speaking Spanish. Marianne Williamson made a joke on Twitter saying, I guess I have to learn Spanish by tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Is that a winning move to draw voters in? Because I'm quite sure you're going to see at least the alt-right today take that mashup and spread that around and say, look, Democrats don't want to put America first. Was doing that a good move for the primary?
You know, I think it signals, Stephanie, the importance of the Hispanic vote, the fact that many unprompted went there with the Spanish language, but it felt a little bit like Hispandering to me. And if you're going to do some of this stuff, come out with a little bit better than the D- high school Spanish. You know, at least you want to go with the A+. But having said that, it is an important segment of the electorate. You see the case being made, and I think that's going to be something pronounced tonight. We'll see tonight if another candidate or 2 to go in that direction as well.
Buttigieg may go Norwegian. Jonathan, let's talk Bill de Blasio. Many people on the national stage who didn't know him thought he had a standout night. But New Yorkers, I live in New York, as he got up there and railed against the elites, talked about working for the working class in New York City, were scratching their heads because, let's be honest, there's little to no working class in New York.
It's one thing to be for.
Or I would say in Manhattan, in the 5 boroughs, it's broader, but you wouldn't look at New York City and say this is a place that works for the working man.
It's one thing to be for the working class. It's another thing to pretend that you're not elite, to rail against the elites, the people that you're mixing with. If you're Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio is a graduate of NYU and of Columbia. His father is a graduate of Yale and of Harvard. His mother of Smith, his grandfather of Harvard. This is not somebody that I would look at and say to myself, well, God, he's really had a lot of obstacles in his life to becoming elite. And by the way, he's the mayor of New York City. He is the very definition of elite. For him to rail against elites is, I don't want to say disingenuous, but pretty much anybody else would.
There you go. Charlie, you thought last night was a win for President Trump because of the progressive messaging. Was it also a win because there wasn't much messaging about him? Just think about this. In the last week alone, We narrowly avoided a military strike against Iran. The president was accused of rape. And as of yesterday, we know that Robert Mueller, who put President Trump's campaign manager in jail, is now going to testify. None of that was touched. How big of a win is that for the president?
I think that, by the way, that was extraordinary, the fact that they did not go after Donald Trump more. And this is part of the problem, that you have all of these stories that ought to be dominating the debate and dominating the news, but the Democrats cannot resist the temptation to form firing squad. And as a result, look, I mean, think about the things they could have talked about. And this debate really should be the audition for who can take on Donald Trump. And, again, the reason I think it's a win is that they're taking positions that will get them through the progressive primary, but are going to be like an albatross in a general election. Look, Medicare for All right now polls very well until people are told it takes away your private insurance. One poll after another shows people do not understand that when they're told that, the numbers change very dramatically. Trust me, if Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders is the nominee, the Republicans will spend $500 million telling people that. And that's going to be an issue for millions of voters who may be totally disgusted by Donald Trump and are willing to vote against him, but just cannot bring themselves to vote for somebody who's going to take away the private health insurance of millions of Americans, which is why that was such a decisive moment at the debate last night.
But was it a mistake for Democrats to not focus on simply slamming the president for 2 hours? Victoria, the Democrats won in the midterms on policy, on health care, not on attacking Trump.
They did it, and last night they tried to show that. And I think I want to focus, as being a Texan, on the Texas duel, on the details of immigration. So here we really saw the one issue of immigration, folks getting down deep into it. This is the breakout moment for Julian Castro, where we really saw him take off. And
let's actually watch it.
Yeah.
Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Beto. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I introduced legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true. If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
Following the debate, Dan Rather asked on Twitter, who thinks Julian Castro had a breakout night? Castro himself responded, me. But he's not alone. What did he do to Beto?
Well, first of all, he stopped the momentum. So Beto, especially coming off of the midterm election, had gained a lot of momentum in Texas and across the country. He was this new, fresh face. He had a ton of money. But last night, he really stopped him in his tracks. Beto is not a good debater. We saw that with Ted Cruz, and we saw it again last night. Something's going to have to change for the next debate, or he's not going to survive much longer.
Fernand?
I go back to something that Charlie said. What was so interesting for me, having seen so many of these Democratic primary debates over the years, it felt like Donald Trump was just another Republican president, not a president that is under the specter of impeachment. It could have been George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, or even Ronald Reagan. And the fact that the Democrats didn't take the battle to Trump and really try and make this entire campaign a referendum on what seems to be, for most people, an abnormal presidency, I thought was a lost opportunity.
Jonathan, what's your take? A moment ago, Charlie was saying if Democrats go very progressive now, they'll be haunted by this in the general. How come Republicans don't face the same thing? Last night, Lindsey Graham tweeting, watching this debate, I'm thinking of a third term for President Trump. Well, it was 2 years ago, Lindsey Graham on Twitter saying that the president was a disgrace, called him a kook, said if Donald Trump got the Republican nomination, they'd get wiped out. That hasn't harmed him.
It hasn't.